Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, I have 30 extra deck monsters that are generic that you could potentially play in your deck. So, I'm going to go over just all of these different cards that you could potentially play, and how they can help you in deck building to choose some additional options for you. Now, these are cards that most people wouldn't necessarily consider or think of. Obviously, everyone knows Verte, DPE, Hulk, stuff like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about some of the lesser known cards that can still be utilized and help. Obviously, I have a feeling that you're going to know some of these cards that are on this list, but hopefully you don't know all of them, and I am able to help you out in one way or another with the deck building to allow you to have just more options. So, we're going to start off with the fusions. Now, a generic fusion is pretty rare, but when I say generic, it means something that is either an instant fusion target or a super polymerization target, or you can fusion out in some other way without needing to actually use the fusion specifically. So, we are going to start off with Millennium Eyes Restrict. Now, I have a feeling this is probably the most well-known, but it is an instant fusion target, and what it does is, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, or in their graveyard, equip that target to this card. To this card you control. It gains attack and defense equal to that monster's effect, or equal to that monster's, and monsters with the equipped monster's name cannot attack. Also, their effects on the field and their activated effects are negated. So, basically, what this does is, if your opponent has something like a monster on the field, for example, a Baron, or a better example is like a Chi Xiao on their side of the field, you're able to go into your Millennium Eyes Restrict, and then if they activate an effect, you could just like steal it. It's pretty nice. It's not crazy, but it is something that you can utilize with an instant fusion to kind of give you a little bit more resilience. Yeah, that's basically it. Also, because it can target an effect monster in your graveyard, if your opponent discards something like a hand trap, you can just steal the hand trap and negate it. So there you go. Your opponent activates an Ash Blossom, negate. Your opponent activates an effect Veiler, negate. That's mostly what it's used for, but overall, it's just a very good instant fusion target. Next, we have Mud Dragon. Now, this one also, I think a lot of people know, but I want to explain what it does because I feel like a lot of people don't know why this is a good option. So, first of all, it does require two monsters with the same attribute but different types. So, this means that if you have two dark monsters, you're able to fusion summon as long as they are different types. So, if they're both, for example, fairies, can't use those. But if it's like a fiend and a fairy, you can use both of those to go into this guy. But most importantly, your opponent cannot target this card or monsters on the field with the same attribute as this card with card effects. That includes their own monsters. So, for example, if there is something like a virtual world that you are playing against that wants to target its own monsters, you can declare the attribute to be the same as the attribute of the monster on the field, which oftentimes is wind, and you can prevent them from even targeting the monster. This is very nice in decks that just want to target and utilize their own monsters as targets. But it can also protect you from your own targets as well, or from like being targeted itself. Also, since this card is non-targetable all the time, if you don't use the effect, you can just have a non-targetable monster on your side of the field, which is also very nice. It does have the quick effect to change its attribute as well, which I forgot to mention. Moving on, we have another instant fusion target with Sea Monsters of Theseus. This is a level 5 tuner. That is an instant fusion target. It's a normal monster. You can also, I think it's ready fusion into this guy, if I recall correctly. It's like the super or instant fusion replacement. So you can go into this guy, I think, with that as well. I could be wrong. It may be a level 4 or lower. But since it doesn't have an effect, it just allows you to go into this guy pretty consistently. And with this, you can go into, if you have a level 3, you can go into a level 8, or you can obviously make Hulk and Fibrax with this as well. So, very nice. And then the last fusion we have is Audis Vortex Dragon. This one requires an Odd Eyes monster and a Pendulum monster, or it requires your Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. So this card actually is the way to summon the other fusion. So we're going to talk about this one first. You detach it. Sorry. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can detach a material, negate the attack, then special summon an Audis monster from your hand to graveyard. That doesn't really matter. But if this Xyz summoned card is sent to the graveyard in any fashion, you can special summon an Audis monster from your extra deck, except this guy, and then you can only use each effect once per turn. So what you will end up summoning is an Audis Vortex Dragon. Vortex Dragon allows you to target a face-up... this one. When a spell or trap or another monster effect is activated, you can shuffle a face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck into the deck, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Now, the Audis Absolute is a rank 7, and the Vortex Dragon specifically works with pendulums. So this is more so for level 7 pendulum decks, or decks that can go into rank 7s. But as a generic option, this is very nice, especially with things like Metal Foes that can very easily go into the rank 7. It's a nice Omni Negate that you can use. Before we get on to the rest of the video, did you know that 70% of the people who watch my content aren't subscribed? If you end up liking the content, consider subscribing. You can always unsubscribe later if you end up not liking it. Anyway, let's get on to the rest of the video. Moving on to the synchros. We have quite a few synchros here, but we are going to start off with Crimson Blader. I think a lot of people know this from like Dragon Rulers, as well as I think a few Sword Soul players have played it, but it's just a generic level 8, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, your opponent cannot normal or special summon level 5 or higher monsters during their next turn. Since this locks them out of normal and special summoning, it shuts down a lot. However, because it is specifically level monsters and not rank/Xyz, you can still make Xyz plays. So this is really good if you want to beat like Sword Soul in particular. You walk into it, and you can make this in Sword Soul. So you make this, you walk into a monster your opponent controls, all of a sudden they're locked out of that extra deck basically entirely. So yeah, there's that. And since it prevents them from special summoning and not just like special summoning from the extra deck, they're locked out of like even bringing it back from the grave, which is very nice. Next up, we have Ruddy Rose Dragon. Now, the only thing that you really need to know is the fact that it is a level 10 generic monster. Obviously, they're all generic. But if this card is synchro summoned, you can banish all cards from the graveyards. All of the cards from the graveyard are banished if this card hits the field, which is very nice against graveyard-reliant decks, or if you want to banish a whole bunch of monsters for something like a Gren Maju, right? It just makes a whole lot of sense, especially in a meta where graveyard is basically king. Being able to banish a whole lot of things from the graveyard and potentially set up even more with your banished cards is very nice. You can play this in a myriad of decks. The one that I play it in is Sword Soul, just as an additional option to make my Changing really big. So there's that. Next up, we have, again, another pairing with Power Tool Dragon as well as Ultimaya Zulkin. So let's start with Power Tool Dragon. Once per turn, reveal 3 equip spells, randomly add, or your opponent randomly adds one to the hand, and you shuffle the others into the deck. If this card would be destroyed while it has an equip card, you send one of those to the graveyard instead. Mostly it's used to search out a free equip spell. This can be used to search out something like Different Dimension Reincarnation, which is a free special summon as an equip card for one of your banished cards. Well, it's not free, but you discard a card, special summon one of your banished monsters back to the field, which is very nice. Also, it pairs with Ultimaya Zulkin. This can be special summoned by sending 2 level 5 or higher monsters with the same level to the graveyard, a tuner and a non-tuner. And then once per turn, if a spell or trap is set to your field, you can special summon a Power Tool Synchro Dragon from your extra deck. So you just get a free special summon of the Power Tool, so you don't even have to make the level 7 Power Tool Dragon. You can go into this guy instead, if that's easier. As well as, while you control another Synchro, monsters cannot target this card for attacks. Also, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. So it becomes untargetable while you control another Synchro, which is very nice just to be able to bring out this free material as long as you have the level 5 or higher materials for it, which can sometimes be easier to make. So just overall, pretty nice generic Synchros to go into that we don't already know with like Baron and stuff like that. Moving on to the Xyz, there are a whole lot of these. We're going to start with the rank 1 in Kinkinggashi Fuku, which is 2 level 1 monsters, unaffected by other other card effects. Just straight up unaffected. It is 0/0, so it doesn't have any attack or defense. But once per turn, you can detach 2 materials. For the rest of this turn, this card cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. So the reason that this is so good is, 1, yes, it can make Zeus, but 2, it being unaffected means that even if your opponent were to, say, activate something to negate its effect, you can still punch into something, and you're guaranteed to get that Zeus, which is very nice if you're able to get those 2 level 1s, which mostly comes up in, like, Leerlisk stuff, but any deck that plays level 1s, like, for example, Drytron, can also make this card, and it's very nice to just, like, make Zeus and clear the board before proceeding with your plays. A similar card in nature is the Fortune Tune. This just requires 2 level 3s, and neither player can target this card on the field with card effects, and if this card would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach a material from this card instead. And then during the standby, you gain 500, and then if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 2 level 3 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle them both into the deck, return this card from your graveyard to the extra deck. So it basically recurs your materials. I have used this personally in Punk. You make this with your 2 level 3 punks on the field, and then you can use it on the following turn to make Zeus. You survive 1 turn, they attack in, you're unaffected, you're not destroyed. Hopefully you can survive just the 1 attack. And then on the following turn, you use the second material to attack in to something, detach the material, make a downer, make a Zeus, wipe the field. Make sense? Bamboozle and Gossip Shadow. Now, I know that you know that this makes Rongo. However, this is also just good at preventing hand traps from going off. Reason being, once per turn, when an opponent's monster activates its effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card, and then the effect becomes both players draw a card. This is, I think, more important than it making Rongo. You can make this generic level 3 in order to just straight up negate one of your opponent's hand traps or one of your opponent's monster effects and draw a card for yourself. Now, it also draws your opponent a card, but stopping a key search or a key effect, like for example a Moye or a Taya, is very nice to just draw a card instead. So again, a very nice card, and it being generic means that it can also just prevent hand traps. Also, being able to tuck materials under a number XZ monster is also nice. Doesn't come up too often, other than Rongo, but yeah, very nice just hand trap stopper overall. And with 2600 defense, it's pretty difficult to get over. Here we have more of a free-to-play option, as well as, well, I mean, all of these have been free-to-play in Master Duel, at the very least. But Evil Swarm Nightmare, this card's very interesting. It's 2 level 4 dark monsters, but when an opponent special summons a monster, you can detach a material and then change it to face down defense position. This is very nice just to kind of stop plays or slow them down if you have those extra materials just to make this guy. It's not that big of a deal if you can't make it as well, which makes it a very nice just tech option if you have the extra deck space or you're playing a rank 4 dark engine. Another card we have is Digaris. This one I'm pretty sure a lot of people also know, but this one is very good because it has so many different options. I think a lot of people see this first effect where you skip the next draw phase, draw 2, discard 1, and they kind of look past the rest of these. But there are more effects that this guy has. As a generic rank 4, it can also skip the next main phase 1 to special summon a monster from your graveyard in defense position. Really good for FTKs, but overall, it is a little high risk, high reward. But if you can get the board necessary to just like win the game by itself, being able to just skip the main phase or being able to bring back any monster is enough to maybe make it worth it to skip your main phase 1. This is where like the risk reward comes in and why it's not played in every deck as well. You can also skip your battle phase to double the attack of one monster you control until the end of this turn. So if you need to punch over something as well, you can just double the attack, make a really big 10,000 attack point access code, and just kill your opponent that way. This one I think a lot of other people will know, but I think it is something that can be easily teched into a lot of decks, and it is Tornado Dragon. Once per turn, quick effect, detach a material, target a spell or trap, destroy it. Pretty simple, but it's a quick effect. It's basically MST on a rank 4 monster, which is very nice. Again, if you're playing a rank 4 deck, consider playing this. It's very, very nice. And a lot of decks are playing spells and traps that they want to set And if you could just hit those, it causes a lot of problems. We also have a Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This one's pretty simple, and I think, again, a lot of people will know this, but you can detach 2 materials, target a face-up card your opponent controls, or a face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes half, and you gain that attack, which is very nice. Basically, you'll always be able to punch into that monster for 2,500 damage, and you'll make your guy pretty large. And since it keeps the attack, it does make it a lot more difficult to deal with, other than just like walking over it, other than like with monster effects or something like that. It's difficult to walk over. There we go. Moving on, we have Silent Honor Arc. I think a lot of people who have played the game for a while will know Silent Honor Arc because, it's a kind of crazy card that really changed the meta when it came out and has since not seen a lot of play. But you can detach 2 materials from this card, target a special summon monster your opponent controls in face-up attack position, and attach it to this card as material. Great way to deal with powerful, annoying boss monsters that have high attack, like an access code that's stuck around. You make this rank 4, you steal the monster, all of a sudden it's now part of you as material, and you can just attack in for the 21. Pretty simple. We've already talked about the Absolute Dragon. Digiersu, I think, again, a lot of people know this from Orchist, but it is a just generic rank 8 that you can make. You can send... Well, when it is special summoned, you can activate one of these effects, send a monster or a card your opponent controls to the graveyard. The second effect is mostly useful in Orchist, so that one comes up significantly less. However, it does have the protection effect where if a card you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach a material from your hand or from this card instead. So this means it also protects you from things like Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, or what have you, because it does say a card. Any card, doesn't have to be a monster, doesn't have to be a spell or trap, just any card, you detach a material, bada bing, bada boom. Also, that effect I don't believe is once per turn. You can only special summon it once per turn, but this effect is not a once per turn. So if you're able to put the 2 materials on it, that's 2 protections, as well as being able to send a card. Very nice. We have Sanathon, the Sky Prison, as another generic rank 8 that is really good in the late game, because what it does is it gains 100 attack and defense for each monster in the graveyard, so the more monsters in the grave, the better it is. And then once per turn, you can detach a material from this card until the end of your opponent's next turn. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects. Also, neither player can special summon monsters from their graveyard. So this is very good against decks that specifically want to special summon from the grave. There aren't too many that want to do exactly that, but it is still nice to have that option in case, like, you're playing against Eldritch and they want to they don't do that, so never mind. But like other zombie decks, like if a Baylor Druck is in the grave, you could just slap this down, prevent your opponent from special summoning, and protect it as well. And then, of course, we have a whole bunch of trains. So let's talk about the trains. They are rank 10s that you can utilize, rank 10 and 11s that you can utilize to just kind of go for big damage. We have Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Super Dora, 81, number 81. Once per turn, quick effect, you can detach a material, target a face-up monster on the field. That target is unaffected by card effects, except its own, until the end of this turn. So the reason that this is so good is because it doesn't have to specifically target itself, but it can also target itself. And as a rank 10 with a whole bunch of attack and defense, it makes it very difficult to deal with. Because, say your opponent's in draw phase, you could just activate this, protect yourself, then if they don't have anything that's like a quick play specifically to deal with that, you're off to the races and you're safe. We also have Gustav Max. Gustav Max just deals 2,000 damage by detaching a material. However, it can also go into Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Juggernaut Libe. Now this card is rather interesting because once per turn, you can also Xyz this on top of a rank 10 machine Xyz. And you can detach a material. This gains 2,000 attack and defense. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot declare attacks. You cannot declare an attack. You can only declare an attack with this card. Sorry. And then during each battle phase, this card can make an additional attack depending on how many materials it has. So, if it has 2 materials, it can make 3 attacks. If it has 1 material, it can make 2 attacks. If it has 5 materials, it can make 6 attacks. Hopefully that made sense. But yeah, it just gains an extra attack plus the amount of materials it has, which means it's very good at OTKing. And you could go Super Dreadnought, Rail Cannon, Gustav Max, and then go into the Libe, and if your opponent has no monsters on their side of the field, you could just punch in for lethal, post the 2000 burn damage. That's it for the Xyz. Let's talk about Link monsters. We have Gravity Controller. Gravity Controller is rather unique in what it requires for materials. It requires a non-Link monster in the extra monster zone, which means if you Link summon into, if you Pendulum summon out one of your Pendulum monsters from the extra deck, you can put it in the extra monster zone, and then you can go into this guy, which gets you 1, a Link arrow, but 2, a pretty nice effect. First of all, it can be used as Link material the turn it's Link summoned, but it cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster in the main monster zone, and at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster in the extra monster zone, you can return both of those monsters to the deck. So, that's very nice. It just gets rid of a monster that your opponent controls pretty safely. Moving on, we have Barricade Board Blocker. This is mostly used as just a 2 monsters with different names. Link 2 with very good arrows, a down and a left. That's mostly what it's used for, but it can also discard a card and then during the end phase add a continuous or field spell from your deck to your hand. Also, face-up spells you control cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects. So, it's protection for your spells, and it searches spells which are more difficult to search. Overall, a very nice card. We have Cross Sheep. A lot of people know what it does with fusion monsters, where you can special summon a level 4 or lower monster from the grave, but it does have a whole bunch of other effects as well. With Rituals, you draw 2, discard 2, and with Synchros, all monsters you control gain 700, and with Xyz, all monsters your opponent controls lose 700. So, all in all, Cross Sheep is pretty simple. It's additional advantage if you're able to go into this with another monster. You just special summon it to a zone this card points to, and you're able to get those advantages. It's best with Ritual and Fusion, so play it in one of those decks, and you gain a lot of advantage. Another card we have is Security Dragon. Security Dragon has some pretty nice arrows. It is facing up and down as well, and because it requires just any 2 monsters, including tokens, including non-effects, etc., etc., it's very easy to link into. But once while this face-up card is co-linked, once while face-up on the field, if this card is co-linked, there we go, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, return it to the hand. It's very nice as, like, a way to go and link climb into access code or other such monsters. You just get to return another monster your opponent controls. There you go. Moving on, we are going to talk about Dark and Light Charmers with Lina and Dark, obviously. But basically, these just require a Dark monster for Dark and a Light monster for Light, and then any other monster. And what they do is you could target a Dark monster for Dark in your opponent's graveyard, or a Light monster for Light, or Lina, I guess, and you are able to special summon it to a zone this card points to. So you're able to steal an opponent's monster from the graveyard, which is very nice. And then if they are destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, while in the owner's monster zone, you can add a Dark monster or a Light monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. So it's very nice in simplified game states. You can steal an opponent's monster, keep it on your side of the field, and then you get that additional search when you need it for whatever it may be. So yeah, there you go. Lina can steal something like an Eldritch. You can steal a DPE with Dark. All in all, very nice. And also, it doesn't negate the effects, which is kind of crazy. That's all. Moving on, we have Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops. This card just requires 3 Xyz monsters, and it's unaffected by all other monster effects, except for Xyz. Pretty nice. And with 4000 attack, it makes it difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. On top of that, you can target an Xyz monster in your graveyard and a card your opponent controls, special summon the monster from your graveyard, and if you do, attach the opponent's card to it as material. So again, this can deal with cards that are like spells and traps. So something like a Floodgate, as long as you're able to still activate this effect, you're able to deal with that opponent's card and continue playing. So yeah, all in all, very solid card. And the last one that we have is is Unchained Abomination, which requires 2+ link monsters as its material, and as a link 4, it does require 2+ monsters, including a link monster, and as a link 4, it has some pretty decent effects. If a card on the field is destroyed by a card effect, except the Unchained Abomination, you can target a card in the field, destroy it. When another monster is destroyed by battle, you can target a card in the field, destroy it. During the end phase, target a card in the field, destroy it. I had this played against me. It wiped my entire board of 4 monsters because they just made this. They popped a card, they walked into another card, they popped another card, and then during the end phase, they popped the last card, and all 4 of them were gone, which was absolutely insane. So yeah, this card can deal with boards pretty effectively, and since, again, it doesn't target monsters, it targets cards, it means that you can deal with back row if you need to as well. So, hopefully these are able to be put into some of your decks and that you learned something from this. And if you did, drop a like down below. It helps me out a lot. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. That's going to be it. And just remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.